My name's Elijah. I'm 32 years old, and I live in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Atlanta, Georgia. I never thought I'd be writing something like this. Not because I'm particularly shy, but because I never expected the world to fall apart in a way that felt so silent, so invisible. No fire in the sky, no booming explosion, just a flicker, then darkness. It started on a Thursday. The forecast said we were going to have unusually strong solar activity. I remember hearing about it on the news while microwaving leftover chicken lo mein. Potential for high geomagnetic interference, they said, and I barely paid attention. It sounded like one of those things they throw into the weather report just to pad out airtime. By Friday morning, the world had changed. I woke up to the blaring silence of no electronics. My alarm clock, dead. My phone wouldn't turn on. I thought maybe it had just died in the night, but the wall charger didn't work either. I went to my laptop. Nothing. Even the LED on the coffee maker was off. Stepping outside into the early morning haze, I noticed my neighbors doing the same, peeking out of their homes, phones in hand, looking confused. Some were checking their cars, turning the ignition only to get nothing. Engines wouldn't even click. A guy across the street shouted, "Yo! Anyone's car work?" No one answered. Just a wave of worried looks. It took only a few hours before word spread. A solar flare, massive, the kind they said could happen once every 100 years, had slammed into Earth's magnetic field. It had fried electrical systems across the Americas. Satellites were down, the internet was gone, cell towers had gone silent. We were blind, deaf, and very quickly scared. At first it was weirdly quiet. A kind of calm that only comes when people still don't fully understand what's happening. People walked around the block. Some gathered at gas stations, still hoping their debit cards might work. Of course they didn't. No power meant no digital payment. And most places didn't have backup generators. Or if they did, they weren't working. By day 2, the grocery stores were emptied. I had about a week's worth of food in my apartment. Maybe a bit more if I rationed it. A couple cans of soup, rice, peanut butter, some stale cereal. No electricity meant the fridge was slowly warming up. I cooked all the frozen meat I had on a camping stove I kept under the sink. Leftovers from a bachelor party camping trip 2 years back. The roads were gridlocked with abandoned cars. Without traffic signals, no one dared drive too far. Accidents happened. Tempers flared. And then the violence started. I think it began with desperation. People needed insulin, needed formula, needed food. When they couldn't get it the polite way, they started taking it. A gas station on the corner of Moreland and Memorial was set on fire after a group of people tried to break in. I saw the smoke from my balcony. My neighbor, Trey, came up to the third floor just to watch it with me. Neither of us spoke. Nighttime was the worst. Without lights, the city turned into a blanket of darkness. The stars were brighter than I had ever seen them, but I wasn't looking up. I was looking out, down the street, over the alley behind my building, anywhere someone might come from. I nailed my door shut from the inside and kept my baseball bat next to my bed. I didn't sleep much. One night, I heard someone banging on apartment doors below. Loud, insistent, then a scream, a few more shouts. I didn't open mine. On day 5, a voice came through on a wind-up radio I'd bought on a whim years ago. "This is the emergency broadcast system. A Class X solar event has disabled all satellite and electrical infrastructure across the Western Hemisphere. Authorities are working to restore order. Please remain calm, stay in your homes, and conserve resources." It played in a loop every couple hours. That was all we got. No updates, no timelines. Trey and I teamed up. We blocked off the stairwell to our floor. We made a deal. If one of us got sick or got hurt, the other would help. We pooled our food, kept watch in shifts, and did our best to not let fear turn into panic. But outside, things got worse. I saw someone get stabbed over a case of bottled water outside a Rite Aid. People were looting homes, dragging TVs and laptops out, even though nothing worked. It was madness. Like people didn't know what else to do except steal what they could. even if it had no use. And the heat. Without AC, Atlanta felt like a furnace. We were sweating through our clothes just lying still. Some people died from it. Elderly folks mostly. No ambulances. No response. It was like watching civilization rot in real time. We heard about the government's response from some guy who came through the building looking for batteries. They declared martial law, he said. National Guards rolling into major cities. They're setting up checkpoints, distributing food, keeping order. But we hadn't seen them, not yet. And when they did come, it wasn't what I expected. They rolled in with Humvees, guns drawn, faces blank, no smiles, no comfort. Just men with rifles shouting orders, pushing people back, hurting them like animals. Stay in your homes unless instructed otherwise. Looters will be shot. They weren't kidding. I watched a kid, maybe 16, get gunned down near the high school for carrying a crowbar. No warning, just a pop, and he dropped. Order, they called it. I called it something else. More days passed. Time blurred. Trey got sick, some kind of infection. No antibiotics. I tried everything I could, but I wasn't a doctor. I held his hand while he died. Then I wrapped him in a sheet and left him on the balcony. I couldn't bury him. The ground was too hard. And I was too tired. People started leaving the city, on foot mostly, heading north. Rumor was that some parts of Europe still had power. Flights obviously weren't an option. Boats, maybe. It was a dream wrapped in desperation. I didn't go. I stayed. Not because I had a plan, but because leaving didn't make sense either. Every place had its own version of hell now. And I knew mine. I got by on canned beans and rainwater. I kept the windows boarded. I stayed quiet. And I waited, because something told me we weren't through the worst of it yet. I don't know what day it was anymore. My phone was a paperweight. My watch dead weeks ago. Time became hunger. Time became the sound of footsteps echoing through stairwells. Time became silence. Too much of it. And sometimes not enough. The first real threat came in the form of voices. Not just one or two, but a group. I heard them around midnight, creeping through the halls below my floor. They weren't shouting. They weren't rushing. They were organized. Calm. That's what scared me most. They were looters, but not like the early ones. These were different. Tactical. Quiet. They weren't breaking doors, they were picking them. I heard the telltale clink of a lock being manipulated, then a soft push, then footsteps, then whispers, then nothing, then another door. They were sweeping the building. I grabbed my bat and sat in the darkest corner of my apartment, behind the overturned couch, my back to the wall. My heart thudded so hard it made my chest ache. The air was thick and warm. My throat was dry. The lock on my door wiggled once, twice, then stopped. One of the looters muttered something about already cleared, and they moved on. I don't know if it was luck or if they thought someone else had checked it. But they didn't come in. When I heard the front door slam open below and their voices fade into the city, I didn't relax. I cried, not loud, just enough for salt to sting my eyes. The next morning I did something I hadn't done in days. I left the apartment, not far, just down to Trey's place. I still hadn't touched anything since he died. The sheet on the balcony, now buzzing with flies, was a grim marker of what the city had become. But I needed food, and Trey might have had something left. I found a single can of peaches behind his couch, a few protein bars melted together in a drawer, and 2 bottles of water. It felt like finding treasure. I took it all back upstairs, wrote, "Thank you, man," on the wall in Sharpie, and shut his door for the last time. I didn't think I'd cry again. But I did. Later that week, or what I think was later that week, I heard something I hadn't heard since day 5. A voice. On the radio. It was weak and filled with static, but it was there. "This is K45 Alpha transmitting out of Quebec. All stations respond if able. Conditions remain critical. Repeat, critical. Quebec, Canada." They had power, at least someone did. Or maybe it was battery-powered like mine. Either way, it was a lifeline, a reminder that somewhere, people still existed. I spent hours each day turning the crank to keep the battery alive, hoping to catch more. The voice repeated a few times over the next couple days, always the same message. Then it changed. Safe zone established at Fort Stewart, Georgia. Humanitarian efforts underway. Transportation limited. Priority to children and families. Fort Stewart. It was near Savannah, a 4-hour drive under normal conditions. Walking, it would take days, maybe more. But it was something. I started to plan. I needed supplies. I needed a weapon better than a bat. I needed a pack. But mostly, I needed a reason. And maybe that's what finally made me move. The smell of rot was getting worse. The city had turned from chaos to decay. The people left were either too weak, too stubborn, or too dangerous. I had become all three. I scavenged a nearby pharmacy. It had already been hit, but I found gauze, some iodine, and a half-used bottle of multivitamins. In a sporting goods store someone had tried to burn, I found a machete under broken glass. I left the bat behind. The night before I left, I heard gunshots echo down Memorial Avenue. Not random pops, controlled bursts, military. Then came the rumble of engines. I watched from the roof of my building as two armored vehicles rolled down the street, floodlights scanning buildings, loudspeakers barking orders. Evacuate immediately. This area is being cleared. Report to Checkpoint Alpha 2 or risk detainment. Detainment? I didn't want to know what that meant. I packed the last of my food, just 2 protein bars and some stale crackers, and slipped down the fire escape. My heart pounded so loud I worried someone would hear it. I didn't look back. Getting out of Atlanta was harder than I thought. Abandoned cars lined every road. Some had been stripped for parts, others were torched, blackened skeletons on melting pavement. I kept to the sidewalks, the alleyways. I avoided other people unless they looked as scared as I was. 3 times I saw the military. Once I ducked into a dumpster to avoid them. The second time I hid in a church. The third time, I watched them detain a man for trying to cross a makeshift barrier. He yelled that he was just trying to find his daughter. They beat him, threw him into a truck. They didn't see me. I made it to a suburb I remembered visiting once as a kid. Stonecrest, maybe? The signs were faded or torn down. A house with a broken window caught my eye. I climbed in through the back. Inside it was cool, quiet, empty. I found canned chili, a few bottles of water, and miraculously, a working hand pump flashlight. I stayed there for 2 nights, listening to the static hum of the radio. Fort Stewart remains operational. Report to checkpoints. Martial law remains in effect. On the 3rd day, I woke up to the sound of footsteps inside the house. Not mine. They were careful, slow. Whoever it was, they were looking for something. Or someone. I crawled under the bed, heart in my throat. The door creaked open. A flashlight beam scanned the room. It paused, then moved on. I didn't breathe for 5 full minutes. When I emerged, the front door was open. A loaf of moldy bread was missing from the counter. They had taken only what they needed. Maybe not everyone had gone mad. I kept moving, crossing rivers, avoiding roads, sleeping in churches, barns, gas stations. Every day the sun felt hotter. Every night the stars felt closer. I passed a small group heading north. One woman had a dog. A kid carried a map. They asked where I was going. I said east. They offered me water. I gave them my last vitamin bottle in return. The kid smiled. It was the first time I'd seen someone smile in a while. I think I'm halfway to Fort Stewart now. My shoes are falling apart. My pack is lighter than ever. I've eaten things I wouldn't have touched a month ago. But I'm alive. And when I get there, if I get there, I'll find out if any of this still matters. If anyone still remembers what came before the flare. Because in the silence that followed the sun's roar, we all had to decide who we'd become without the hum of civilization. And I decided to survive.
I always take the F line home, Midtown to Queens. It's muscle memory by now. Turn left out of my office building, earbuds in, cut past the food trucks and the guy who sells knockoff colognes. Same time, same route, same doors when the train pulls in. I know the rhythm of the crowd, the way the bodies move when the train jolts forward, and where to stand so you're not in front of the heater vents in winter. Routine is safe, familiar, until it isn't. It started on a Thursday. I remember because I had a conference call that morning with a client in Chicago, and I was wearing a blazer that made my armpits sweat. I was exhausted and impatient to get home. Rush hour. The worst. I got to the platform at 5:41 p.m. I remember checking. That's when I noticed him. Not at first, not directly. He wasn't doing anything wrong, just standing across the platform, maybe 15 feet away. But there was something about him. Something that made my gut coil. Black slacks, pressed and sharp, polished shoes, a beige pea coat buttoned all the way up despite the heat of the subway station. He had gray in his hair, neatly combed back, clean shaven. He looked like a Wall Street guy, only older. Maybe mid-50s, though the way he stood, shoulders square, posture straight, gave off the feeling of strength, not frailty. His eyes were the worst part. Cold, focused, fixed, right on me. I thought I was imagining it. Maybe he was looking past me. People stare in New York. It's part of the background noise. But when the train came and I got on, he did too. Not next to me. Not close enough to alarm anyone. But close enough that I could still feel it. That invisible pull. The kind you get when a stranger watches you too long at a bar. I took out my phone and pretended to scroll. My reflection in the glass looked calm. Bored. Normal. Inside, I was rigid. My building was 20 minutes away. I told myself it was nothing, that I was tired, that I was overthinking. He got off at my stop. So did I. And when I crossed the turnstile and glanced back, he was there, 10 feet behind me. Same pace, same blank expression. That's when I stopped pretending. I didn't go straight home. I turned left instead of right and walked toward the bodega on 67th. My heart was thudding in my throat. I slipped between two guys smoking outside and ducked into the cramped aisles. I pretended to shop, watched him through the corner of the store window. He didn't come in. He stood across the street, watching. I told myself, maybe he lives nearby. Maybe I'm being paranoid. But my feet wouldn't move. My fingers gripped a bottle of seltzer so tightly the condensation turned warm. After 10 minutes, he was gone. Or so I thought. I made it home, bolted the door, and stood in my dark apartment with my back to it. My fingers were still shaking as I dropped my keys. I didn't eat dinner. I didn't turn on the TV. That night, I pushed my dresser in front of the front door. Friday, I switched it up. Took the E line to work. No sign of him. I spent the day convincing myself it had been nothing. A weird coincidence. A man who had no idea he was creeping me out. Until I saw him again. 4:58 p.m. Lobby of my office building. He wasn't standing still this time. He was walking. Past the revolving doors, against the crowd of people exiting the building. Right toward me. Our eyes met. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just kept walking. I turned and rushed out the side exit, heart hammering, phone already in my hand. I ducked into a Duane Reade, my reflection in the freezer door wild-eyed and pale. I called my best friend Jess. "You need to tell the police," she said. "What do I say?" I whispered. "He hasn't touched me. He hasn't said anything. I don't even know his name." "Then follow him, get a photo, something. You need proof." I didn't follow him, but I saw him again, every day. Always near my office, always silent, always watching. It wasn't random anymore. He was following me. By the following week, I stopped taking the subway altogether. I Ubered, I changed my routes. I looked over my shoulder. I was late to meetings, snapping at coworkers. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Then Tuesday happened. It was just past 6 p.m. when I got in the elevator of my apartment building. My Uber had dropped me a block away because of traffic. I jogged to the entrance, scanning the street the whole way. Empty. The elevator creaked as it rose. Fifth floor, my floor. When the doors opened, he was standing there, right there, in the hallway outside my unit. My brain froze. My breath caught. The elevator doors almost closed again before I stepped forward. He didn't move. He didn't run. He smiled. It was the first time he ever did. And it was wrong. Too wide, too confident, as if he knew something I didn't. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded. He didn't answer. I stepped back into the elevator and jabbed the button for the lobby. The doors closed, and I ran. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. I stayed with Jess in Brooklyn. She offered me a drink. I asked for something stronger. I showed her everything. Texts I'd sent myself with timestamps, notes about sightings, descriptions. She nodded slowly. "We're calling the cops tomorrow," she said. We did. The officer at the precinct nodded politely, took my statement, told me to be careful. But without a name, an incident, a threat, there wasn't much they could do. "Could be a misunderstanding," he said. That word, misunderstanding. It made me feel invisible, but it didn't matter. Because that night, while I was still at Jess's place, my phone buzzed. A text, no name, no number. Just a photo of my apartment door. The photo chilled me. I could barely breathe. It was angled down, slightly grainy, taken from maybe 5 feet back. The doormat was visible. So was the N keychain I kept on my doorknob. My stomach clenched so hard I gagged. He had been there, again, while I was gone. He had my number. I stared at Jess, and she could see it all over my face. My phone trembled in my hand. "Call the cops," she said, grabbing her car keys. "Now." I nodded but didn't move. Not yet. My brain was stuck, thinking in spirals. He knows where I live. He got my number. He knows I'm not home. We drove to the precinct, the same one we'd been to that morning. But this time, I had evidence. The photo. An officer took me seriously now. Slightly more. They said they'd start a file, told me to vary my schedule. Consider staying with someone, maybe even file a protective order. But without a name, I was still just a file number in a drawer. So I did the only thing I could do. I became the hunter. Jess helped me set up a plan. We gathered every bit of footage we could from buildings near my work. A coffee shop across the street, a bodega on the corner. We asked around, lied a little, said we were trying to identify someone who'd left their wallet. Most told us to screw off. But one guy, a tired security manager at a loading dock, let us see some grainy footage from his system. It wasn't perfect. But at 5:39 p.m., the day I first saw the man, there he was, in frame, clear enough to make out his face. He was walking east, toward my office, hands in coat pockets, blank stare. We paused it. Jess leaned closer. "That's him?" I nodded. "That's him." We pulled the image and did a reverse search using some online tools. Jess even posted it anonymously in a few New York safety groups. Days passed. Then a message came through. The woman's profile looked real. Mom, Brooklyn, late 30s. Her message read, "I saw your post. I recognize that man. His name is Charles Lorne. He followed my sister in 2017. She filed a report. He vanished after that. I don't know where he went, but be careful. He's dangerous. She said he liked to play games." Games. I didn't sleep that night. I filed a formal report with the police under his name. This time, they found something. He had a sealed record, former military, discharged, no address, no living family, nothing current. But I'd poked the nest. That weekend, I returned to my apartment in daylight, escorted by Jess and her cousin, who owned a Glock. We packed everything essential in 2 hours. I moved into Jess's place for good. When we left, I glanced one last time at the building. A chill ran up my spine. He was watching from a car across the street. Days passed. Then a week. I stayed indoors as much as I could, worked remote. Jess installed extra locks, even a cheap camera near the front door. I stopped answering unknown numbers, blocked dozens, but he always found a way back. Late one night, Jess and I returned from a store run and found a dead pigeon on her front step, neck broken. Inside its beak, there was a rolled up piece of paper. One line, "You'll talk to me eventually." I threw up in the sink. That was the last straw. I couldn't hide anymore. I had to end it. So I set a trap. I went to Midtown near my old job, wore my hair the way I used to, same handbag, same coat. I even took the F line again, and I waited. At 5:50 p.m., he appeared, across the platform, same expression, same coat. Only this time I walked directly toward him. He looked almost surprised, but not scared, amused even. "I know who you are," I said quietly. "Charles, Lorne." His lips twitched into a smile. "Then why are you still standing here?" he asked. I wanted to see the coward up close. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You shouldn't have done that." I turned and walked. Not too fast, just enough to pull him with me, past the platform into the stairwell, down the hallway where the foot traffic thinned out, right into the arms of the two undercover NYPD officers Jess had called in. They took him down hard, found a knife in his coat, a burner phone, a wallet full of IDs with different names. One of them matched a man who'd gone missing in Boston the year before. Another, from Georgia. He was arrested, detained, pending charges from at least 4 states. I heard later that he was likely connected to at least 2 disappearances, but nothing confirmed. The trial is ongoing. I still live with Jess. I'm seeing a therapist twice a week. Sometimes I wake up thinking I hear footsteps in the hallway, or that my phone buzzed with a number I don't recognize. But I'm healing. Slowly. I've learned how invisible women can be, how fear nests in your bones, how justice moves slower than evil. But I also learned that fear, when cornered, can bite back. Hard. And next time, I'll be ready.
My name is Jordan Ray. I'm 30, single, and I live in a little house I inherited from my dad just outside of Ocala, Florida. When everything collapsed, I was working part-time construction jobs and doing Instacart deliveries in between. The American dream, right? It started the way these things always do. Quiet, creeping. I'd noticed the price of eggs jumping past $8 a dozen at Publix. Then gas hit $6 a gallon, then 9. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part came when people stopped pretending things would get better. In early August, there were whispers online. Banks aren't solvent, people said. Supply chains are broken. But mainstream media laughed it off, called it transitory. Then on a Monday morning, I went to fill up my tank, and the pumps at every station in town were dead. Not empty, just off. That same day, my debit card stopped working. At first, I blamed the app. Then I tried the ATM. Nothing. The screen showed a system error. I drove over to my local Bank of America branch. It was locked. Handwritten signs on the door said, "Closed until further notice. No cash on premises." There was a line of people outside, angry, scared. One guy tried to kick the glass door in, shouting, "I have money in there! Give me my goddamn money!" The police came and told everyone to go home. But nobody was getting arrested. It was like even the cops knew things were unraveling. That night, I found out the stock market had tanked over 40% in a single day. That part didn't hit me too hard. I didn't own stocks. But I knew what came next. Everything did. By Thursday, stores had been looted across Gainesville, Orlando, Tampa, Walmart, Target, grocery chains. Gone. The National Guard was deployed to assist local law enforcement. That was the phrasing they used. But the reality looked more like lockdown. Martial law was declared Friday morning. They didn't call it that officially. They said it was a temporary stabilization measure. But we weren't stupid. Curfew was from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Roadblocks were set up along Interstate 75. Supply trucks stopped coming. And if you were caught outside after curfew, you didn't get a ticket. You disappeared. People started trading in cash for food, gas, medicine, anything useful. But by the weekend, cash wasn't worth a damn thing. Barter came back fast. I swapped my old generator for 10 cans of soup and 2 cartons of cigarettes, worth their weight in gold now. Gas was more valuable than anything. I had 5 gallons in red plastic jugs and kept them hidden under a tarp in the shed. The power grid was still working in some areas, but flickering. We knew it wouldn't last. The economy wasn't just collapsing, it was imploding, dragging everything down with it. The scariest part was the silence. People stopped going outside. At night, you'd hear gunshots, screams. Then, nothing. I blocked my windows with blackout curtains and pushed the fridge in front of the door. My neighbor Alan, a 62-year-old retired Marine, came over with his Glock one night and said, "We hold the line or we die. Got it?" I nodded. That was it. We became allies. Not friends, but men with a shared understanding. By Monday, the internet was down across most of Florida. No cell service either. The only news came from battery-powered radios. One local station repeated a pre-recorded message over and over. Remain calm. Stay indoors. Ration supplies. Military units will distribute aid soon. Aid never came. Instead, the National Guard rolled through neighborhoods like mine in armored Humvees. We weren't allowed to approach them. One woman tried, just walked up asking for insulin for her kid. They zip-tied her and drove away. We never saw her again. I buried my phone in the backyard, along with the GPS unit from my truck. Alan said anything transmitting could get us noticed. He wasn't paranoid, just experienced. I listened to him more than I listened to the government. On the 10th day, something shifted. I was outside chopping wood when I heard yelling, not far. I ducked behind my truck and peeked through the brush. A mob of about 20 people were walking down the road, shouting and banging on doors. They looked ragged, dirty, desperate. One guy carried a crowbar. Another had a shotgun. They weren't from around here. I'd never seen them before. They kicked in the front door of a vacant house 2 doors down from mine. A single shot rang out and someone screamed. Then, silence. Alan saw it too. That night, he came over and handed me a revolver. 6 shots, he said. Don't miss. If they come for us, we shoot first. I didn't argue. I'd never fired a real gun before, but I didn't want to die on my knees. I kept it loaded and on the table next to my cot. The next few nights were worse. They were moving closer, breaking into houses, dragging people out. We could hear it all, the begging, the gunfire, the horror. Alan and I took turns staying awake. By night 13, Ocala was lawless. There was no turning back by then. Cities had become war zones. The rural areas weren't much safer. People holed up in houses like tombs. Nobody trusted anyone. We were all animals now, starving, paranoid, armed. Food ran out faster than you'd think. I had rice, beans, some canned stuff, but no fresh anything. Water still came from the taps, barely. I filled my bathtub and started filtering it. I didn't dare boil it on a fire. It would draw attention. Then, I made my first kill. It wasn't planned. They came in the night. 2 men. Broke the side window with a brick and crawled in. I was sleeping on the floor, heard the crash, reached for the revolver and fired before I saw a face. The first guy dropped instantly. The second ran. I sat there shaking for what felt like an hour. Alan helped me drag the body out before morning. We didn't talk about it. We never even checked who he was. The broadcast changed on day 16. I caught it on my radio just after dawn. Major cities in Florida, Miami, Jacksonville, Tampa, are being evacuated. Refugee zones are being established in northern counties. If you are able to travel safely, proceed north. Identification and screening checkpoints are mandatory. We didn't believe it for a second. Evacuated meant camps. Camps meant fences. Fences meant you weren't leaving. Alan said we should stay. Moving is suicide, he told me. Roads are clogged. Gangs are hunting. Best case, you end up in a FEMA tent. Worst case, you don't make it out of town. I agreed, for now, but food was running out. Water was dirty. I had 2 batteries left for the radio. No meds, no gas. It was unsustainable. That night, I made a choice. I packed a bag, 2 days of food, a canteen, the revolver, a knife. I left Alan a note. If I don't come back, bury the gun. I left before dawn. The world outside felt dead, not quiet, just emptied of life. I followed side roads north toward Gainesville, avoiding major highways. Every once in a while, I'd pass an abandoned vehicle or see smoke on the horizon. Once, I found a flipped-over delivery truck. Someone had stripped it bare, torn out the seats, the engine, the tires. Nothing left but the metal skeleton. Near Orange Lake, I found a woman hiding under a bridge. Her face was gray. She was barefoot, shivering, barely conscious. I gave her my last protein bar. She looked at me and whispered, "They're eating people." I walked away before she could say more. By sunset, I reached a small neighborhood that looked untouched. Some kind of retirement village with chain link fences and wind chimes still hanging. I knocked on one door. A man answered with a rifle pointed at my face. He looked old, worn, like death in denim. "I don't want trouble," I said. "Everyone says that," he replied. Then he looked me up and down. "You're not starving yet. Go before you are." I didn't argue. I camped in the woods that night, listening to the wind and the rustle of unseen animals. I didn't sleep much. The next day I turned around. I realized that Alan was right. Out here, you weren't surviving. You were running from death with no end. I returned to my house 3 days later. Alan was gone. His door was kicked in. Blood smeared the floor. His shotgun was missing. I buried his dog in the backyard. Found it in the bushes, barely recognizable. Then I sat on my porch and stared at the trees. It was over, not the collapse that was still happening. I meant the country, the system, the illusion of normal. It was all gone. No government was going to fix this. No election, no plan, no cavalry. We were on our own now. Florida wasn't America anymore. It was a battlefield. And me? I was no longer a man waiting for help. I was just another animal in the ruins. Surviving, alone, waiting for the next knock at the door,